Author Talk with SJC welcomes Honey Parker.
I am Honey Parker. I'm the author of the Careful-ish series. How did I get where I am? Well, where am I? Where am I physically? At the moment, I'm in the great state of Mississippi, the Magnolia State, and I'm so happy to be here. I love it. Uh, and I don't think that's what you meant when you said, "How did I get here?" I think you meant, "How did I get to authorship?"
But we're open to interpretation here on this channel. No worries.
Well, okay. Well, how I got here in Mississippi is a long and sordid tale. And I've lived a lot of places, and so this is an exciting new one. Um, how I got to authorship towards the very beginning of COVID, my husband and I started doing a Zoom call with friends of ours in New Hampshire. And immediately we were all laughing together at some of the ridiculous things that people were doing during COVID. And one of my friends works at a major network, and she said, "Well, you need to, honey, you need to write this as a sitcom." Because in a former life, my husband and I were screenwriters together in Hollywood, and I had I was in a sitcom program, and so I was home, and it was COVID, and not to be a complete downer, but my mother had just passed, and so it was like a weird in my head time. And I thought, okay, great. I'll write a pilot for a sitcom. And I did it in a day. And the next day I outlined the whole first season. And I knew, having been in Hollywood, that probably nothing would come of it. But I gave it to her, and nothing came of it because her network decided they weren't doing anything COVID related, which is fine. And my husband said, honey, you really need to write that as a novel, because if you write it as a novel, you don't have to wait for anyone to greenlight it, and it'll exist in space. It will be like, no matter what, it'll be. And
Yeah,
I said, okay. I didn't question it. I just started writing, and about 2 or 3 chapters in, he said, it needs to be at least a trilogy. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, because your third book sells your first book. And I said, okay. Like, I didn't, at another time, in another life, I would have questioned it, but I just wasn't questioning anything. And so I just did it. And it started I was so glad that it became novels, because it became much deeper. And even though there's satire and there's laughter and people are doing ridiculous things, and when you do them, you're like, oh, that is not going to work out, my friend. But there's also, it's based in, I think, human behavior, and hopefully it's got a lot of heart too. And so I was glad I got to do it that way.
It absolutely has a lot of heart. Yes, it sounds like you've had quite the adventure to get where you are, and I love it. I love it.
It was good.
Yeah, that sounds like
it was good. 2 years, 3 novels. I feel okay.
Whew, that's amazing. I started reading your books from book 2, Daughter of Careful-ish, and I love the characters. I love jumping into the characters. Please show me again what you have on your desk, because it is a reminder of one of my favorite characters in your story.
Well, I have lots of things on my desk. I've got cocktail swag, because if you've read the book, then you know that I've got a character named The Joy, and she is all about her cocktails. And so I just keep swag with me all the time. It's my mermaid.
I love it.
I've got 3 little cocktail elephants that all face the window, because I was told that was good luck. They have to face out the window. And then I've also got my little bookmark.
Oh, with the daughter, the Careful-ish masks.
And it's got a cocktail recipe on the back.
That's awesome. I need one of those. And because we're so familiar with that right now. That's such a
the first book, which is called Careful-ish, it's a black mask with a martini on it. So I wanted to keep the theme and change it up. And so the mask on this one was my homage to Lily Pulitzer, because one of the characters ends up going to Florida, and so that's where that came from.
Okay, gotcha. The idea of going through COVID and all of the pandemic issues that we have to face, seeing that intertwined, it really just brings a relationship with the characters immediately, because you already have common ground. And I love
Yeah.
that. I love
Well, it was, and I wasn't totally sure what was going to happen when I started this, because obviously I started this in the beginning of COVID. And I was focused on all of these things that we were experiencing together, but I didn't realize how bonding it was going to be. I've had a lot of people tell me, it's everything from, oh, I did that, or I made sourdough, or, which was a big part of the first book. But then in the second book, so they've all spent a lot of time home alone, and they're kind of branching out and maybe doing some things they shouldn't do. And we've all done it, and there was something about being locked in that made us all look at ourselves a little differently and a little more,
right,
and see some things and accept some things and laugh off some things. And so, yeah, there's a lot of that.
There was some wiggle room in there that we might not have given ourselves before.
Well, everybody is very careful-ish. It's
right,
like,
yeah.
It so depends on who you are and where you're living. I went through most of COVID to this point in a resort town in Park City, Utah. I was at the base of a ski resort. And so careful meant something very different there than it did to my friends in Los Angeles that did not leave the house, didn't leave.
Right.
And I have a friend that went through it in New York City who went, I think, 84 days without leaving her New York apartment.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I know.
And it's so funny because here in Mississippi, we didn't really get the whole pandemic experience, maybe a little, but I know that we just didn't have as many restrictions as a lot of people did.
Yeah.
So I would hear of people, only seeing other people from their balcony and things like that. And, even though I didn't go through that stringent of an experience, I still related so well with the characters in your book. I still,
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's because it wasn't just the pandemic, it was also, the experiences of the relationships going on, and the, whether it was your mother or your partner or your friends or, the guy who brings the packages, you had so much going on that you could relate to, that any reader could relate to. So it was a lot of fun to read.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I said it in New York City. I sent the first one in New York City originally because it was so concentrated, and people who were going through COVID there, were really staying in these little places. I mean, I was going for long walks on a mountain or skiing, so I had that. But so they had a heightened experience of what I think most of the rest of us went through, but we all went through it to some extent. And now I am also in the great state of Mississippi, and I can see how it was a little different here. But also, I was surprised when I got here how many people were wearing masks.
Really?
And that was when we got to the Gulf Coast in maybe October, November. And yeah, a lot of stores were, please wear a mask.
Yeah. There's a lot of pockets of places where they're, more strict than others. And
yeah,
I think it's just, there's so many dynamics with it. And there's, whether it's a belief system or whether it's actual health issues, or, you just never know. I think of one motherly figure in particular in your book, or not so motherly figure, who would have laughed at some of the people, for being more careful. And
she absolutely would have
yeah.
scoffed.
Right.
Scoffed,
exactly.
Yeah, well, the parents are very, very important in the book, even though they're, for the most part, minor characters. They have such a huge impact on the main characters, and a lot of that is, my parents have a very big impact on me. In fact, in the book, Steph's parents are my parents.
Okay.
Those are, I'll say, 95% my parents. I gave them a little boost and had them say a couple different things, but in general, I have stolen lines right out of my mother's mouth.
Oh, how funny.
because they're great. But, I think that, I see how my husband's parents affected him. I see how my friends' parents affect them. Um, and it really changes things. And particularly when you're spending time at home, um, it resonates and it ripples.
Yes, for sure. Until you said that, I didn't think about how many of the characters' parents are involved in the story, but you're absolutely right. And I'm going through it in my head, and we'll talk more about it in the spoiler section.
Okay.
Yeah, just going through, I'm like, oh yeah, and them.
Well, by the end of the third book, I mean, I think we've gotten to know everybody's parents, and to the point where I thought, do I need to write a book about the parents?
That would be interesting, like the earlier generation. Here's what was really going on.
Well, I have thought about writing a prequel and doing a book with them all in high school.
Oh, that would be neat.
Which is how they know each other.
Okay, yeah, kind of an origin story.
Yes, exactly.
I would be very interested to see how they got where they are. I think that would actually be fun. So, which of the characters do you think embodies you the most, or do you think you're sprinkled among them?
Well, certainly I have enough quirks for more than 6 characters. So it was always like, okay, which ridiculous thing that I do, like which character does that fit the most? But after I wrote the first book, the only person who got it right was my husband. And the person that I think I'm most like is probably Kimmy.
Okay. Well, yeah, we definitely.
I give her all my commitment phobe issues. Those are a lot of that, and that's why I say that. I mean, she's really snarky and sarcastic, and she feels a lot of things but doesn't say a lot of things in that regard. And total commitment phobe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really love needling her.
I found myself cheering for her and also fussing at her at the same time.
Yeah, me too.
I guess you do that. We do that with ourselves as well. So.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And this way I could just put it on her.
Right.
This extremely brief intermission is brought to you by Slow Burn Marketing. My, what a big brand you have.
You work with your husband, right?
I do. We are Slow Burn Marketing. We started that in 2008. We opened the doors. I had been in advertising in New York. I was an art director, then a writer, then a creative supervisor, and then I left. And I became a freelancer, and I worked in advertising in LA. And he was working in radio doing advertising. And when we moved to Park City, we opened our own agency.
I love that. I love that your whole career, even if it's been different paths, it's all been creativity.
It's all kind of fed the same thing. When I was in New York, I did stand up. There was a contest called Funniest Person in Advertising, and a friend said, you should do that. And I said, I should. And then I got there and I was like, I don't know if I should do this, but I did it. And I ended up winning. And so I started doing stand-up, and that informed advertising, and advertising informed that, and screenwriting, and all of it informed writing the book. I mean, I definitely feel like I write like a screenwriter. I kind of see every chapter as a scene, and it should have a beginning, middle, and end, and invite you to look at the next chapter.
Yes.
So I have that structure kind of burned in me.
Well, I love that structure.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, that is something that kept me reading. And I know I mentioned to you before that it was my elevator book. And that was not an insult at all. It was one of those things, like there's some books that I love, but to play off of your marketing name, it's a slow burn. It's little bits at a time. So if I'm at work and I have to go downstairs, if I'm reading something like that and I look at my phone and I read like a paragraph, it's like all I've got is a description of a tree, and that's all I got. But if I'm reading yours, it's like I've got a whole story in like 2 minutes it takes me to get downstairs, And so I love it. I love the pace of it because it is like watching a sitcom, because I feel like a sitcom, you constantly have little splashes of humor, and you have action, and you have, mystery all kind of tied in there together, and it's fast paced. And so you keep up with it. At first I thought I would be overwhelmed by, I think it's 6 characters, right? 6 main characters. I thought I would be overwhelmed, but I wasn't, because I only got a little piece of each one at a time.
Yeah.
And when I allowed those pieces to start to flow together, then I was like, oh, I totally got this. It really was. It felt like meeting people. Like, you don't usually meet somebody and spend 5 hours with them. You meet them,
Right.
hello, have a dinner, something, and then you see them again later. And that's what it feels like to me. Reading, it's like I get a whole mini story, and it felt also like I didn't think about the sitcom at first, but when you mentioned it, I was like, that's what it's like. What I felt was like it was stand-up. It felt like little stand-up routines, especially with
I didn't steal from myself. I didn't use anything from a stand-up routine, but that, like, that makes me so happy to hear you say that, because when I started writing it, in my mind, in my head, you have these hopes and you never know if it's going to happen, but I wanted people to kind of seem ridiculous at first and frivolous. And then, like, once you get to know them and you start to understand, oh, well, they're under this pressure and that's what sent them that way, or this thing happened and that's why we saw that, but now we're seeing this other side. So I wanted them to kind of grow and evolve and build.
I feel like you layered it where, like you say, at first they were just frivolous, and then you start to see the influences of their relationships in their lives and their influences on each other, and the influence of the pressure from work and the pressure from the pandemic, and and there's just so many different things going on, but it's not overwhelming, which is awesome. It really takes you through the story without, throwing you off course.
Okay, wait. If you haven't read this book yet, Daughter of Carefulish by Honey Parker, we are going to tell you right now where to get it. And then you need to stay tuned, because we will have a spoiler episode coming up next.
So my website is Honey Parker Books, because I like to be obscure. And you'll see, so from there you can get the first book, which is Carefulish, the second book, which is Daughter of Carefulish. The third book is not available yet. That's Bride of Carefulish. And there's also going to be a cocktail book, The Cocktails of Carefulish. And that's not out yet either. So Honey Parker Books, or you can go directly to Amazon, and you can go to carefulish.com or daughterofcarefulish.com. I'll take you right to the books.
Okay. So I guess until we meet again, let's both be careful-ish.
I'll do my best. I always land on an ish.
Yeah, more ish than careful. Absolutely.
Stay careful-ish, my friend.